A son discovers his mother's will, and what he reads in it makes him tell her to pack her bags immediately and get ready to leave his house. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. It might brighten their day and inspire them to do good. Also keep watching because an important lesson awaits at the end of the video. Gerald Nizbit stared at the text on his screen in astonishment. Then he picked up the phone. "Helen," he said crisply to his assistant. "Get me my lawyer on the phone, then Margaret Pratt, then my mother. In that order." Helen had been Gerald's personal assistant for 10 years, and she knew he wasn't a particularly patient man, so she immediately started calling his attorney. In his office, Gerald was staring at the screen and shaking his head in disbelief. Oh, he was going to pay her back for this. Finally, Helen managed to get hold of the lawyer and put him through. "Sam," said Gerald crisply. "Old boy, I just wanted to advise you that you committed a faux pas. You sent me my mother's will for approval instead of sending it to her." On the other side of the line, the lawyer blustered his apologies and embarrassment, but Gerald had said what he wanted to say, so he quickly dismissed him and hung up. He sat staring out of his huge floor-to-ceiling window at the snowy New York skyline until the phone rang again. This time it was Margaret Pratt. Gerald outlined his requirements succinctly and told her, "I want it for today, Miss Pratt." He listened to her objecting on the other side of the line, then interjected, "If you can't get it sorted, I'll go to someone who can." The response on the other side of the line made him smile grimly. "This afternoon, then, at 17 o'clock, he said and hung up. He picked up the internal phone. "Helen, you can get me my mother now," he said. Within seconds, the ever-efficient Helen was patching through Mrs. Edith Nizbit. "Mother," Gerald said, "have two things to tell you. First of all, Sam Kelson sent me your new will by mistake, and I want you to pack your bags immediately." Sitting in the lounge of Gerald's gorgeous house where she lived with him, Edith was speechless. "Gerald, are you upset about the will? Please let me explain." "I don't need your explanations, Mother. I need you to have your bags packed and be ready to leave by 16 o'clock, Gerald said and hung up. Edith sat there with her heart pounding. She thought Gerald would understand. He was the youngest of her 3 children, and the one who'd always stood by her, helped her through the difficulties of life. And when Edith's arthritis threatened to cripple her this last year, even though she was only 62, had taken her home to live with him. Edith went upstairs to her room and packed her bags. Yes, she'd left all her money to her 2 older children, but she honestly thought Gerald would understand. Edith stared at her suitcase with tears blurring her vision. She had hurt her most beloved and kindest child. She had to explain. Edith called Gerald's housekeeper to help her with her suitcase and went downstairs to wait anxiously for Gerald. At 16 o'clock there he was, punctual as ever. He walked in, gave her a brief peck on the cheek, and Edith cried, "Please, Gerald, let me explain." "I don't have time for explanations, Mother. Come," he said. "Everything is arranged." He picked up Edith's bag and carried it out to his car and put it in his trunk. Edith got into the car without a word. Gerald drove without saying a word. "Where are we going, Gerald?" Edith asked, but Gerald chose that exact moment to turn on the radio and didn't answer her. Edith looked around. She'd never been to this part of the city before. "Listen, Gerald, about the will," Edith said bravely. "Oh, the will," said Gerald, glancing over at his mother and frowning. "The will in which you leave your house and $120,000 in savings to be divided between Amy and Oliver, and I get the old cabin by the lake and grandfather's photos from the war, and Dad's watch." "Yes," whispered Edith. "You see." But right then Gerald stopped the car. They had arrived at what appeared to be a small private airport, and a sleek private jet was waiting. Gerald turned to Edith, and there were tears in his eyes. "Oh, Mom, I understand about the house and the money. Amy and Oliver are struggling, and I have more money than I could ever spend. But what you are leaving me, Mom, shows me how well you understand me. You know exactly what is important to me and close to my heart. I have all the money I need, but the memories you are giving me are precious." "But Gerald," gasped Edith, "I thought you were kicking me out." Gerald grinned. No such luck. I'm taking you to Tahiti for 2 weeks. I think it would do your arthritis the world of good, and I could use some quality time with my mom." Edith embraced her youngest, and secretly her favorite son, with tears in her eyes. He'd understood. Edith knew that her father and her husband's keepsakes would be cherished and passed on lovingly by Gerald. The two spent a lovely time in Tahiti, and Gerald got himself a tan and even met a lovely girl who was also on vacation and came from New York, and it looked to Edith like maybe she wouldn't have to wait too long for those grandchildren after all.